Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So let's continue my discoveries and comments on the RadFem, radical feminist philosophy, which is gaining momentum in America and is one of the more militant branches of feminism and is a pernicious thorn that must be plucked out of Islamic society. And so I hope that these video series I've been doing have been beneficial for you and have given you some information that you might not have known but have come across, right? So on my notes here I wrote, RadFems have a great distaste for what they view as compulsory motherhood. They don't think there should be a societal expectation that all women must become mothers. They believe that pushing motherhood serves the goals of the patriarchy to control women's bodies and labor. Now, something interesting here. When you look at how Islam praises mothers, and then you look at how RadFems talk about motherhood, you clearly see man, who's more negative, who's more positive? Who frames it as a trap and ensnarement? Something to be taken on with severe caution and skepticism. It's the RadFems. So I'd argue you can't really be pro-woman and embrace femaleness while dunking on motherhood itself and putting an arbitrary careerist spin on the purpose of life. Because at the end of the day, there's countless women who don't have careers, but they have jobs. One meme that I saw had a woman who was like putting fries in the basket and dunking it, and like, you know, when you put in the fryer, and it says, "I can't have a kid now, I'm busy with my career." And that one hit home because I had a similar situation like that in my life, where someone roasted me when I was a barista at a fine dining Italian restaurant, where I thought, long story short, but it was a sting that till this day I'm like, that person was right. Although I was too immature to see it and didn't know how to process the rudeness of what they were saying, but they had a great point that my job wasn't not a career, it was a rink-a-dink job. Even though you make money, it's still nothing really glorious or purposeful. And I'm a cog in a machine, and the restaurant will go on without me, so why am I spending so much time here? But I digress. The point is that you see a lot of pain in the RadFems when they talk about compulsory motherhood. They see motherhood as boring, still, oppressive, not exciting, not liberating, restrictive, and they don't really have that energy of, I'm excited to have a baby, I'm excited for the journey, I'm positive even though I'm sleep deprived. They don't really want to suffer. They can't really handle suffering. Because motherhood is a real test of your moral fiber. Will you rise to the occasion? Despite the pain, despite the sleeplessness, despite the medical jumps you have to go through, how will you react? And how will you treat your significant other? How will you be during the contractions? How will you be during postpartum? How will you be during the pregnancy journey? It's all an unfolding of the layers of your consciousness and who you are at your most deepest level. What will be revealed? What will be revealed? RadFems, if you think about it, they hide who they really are. They're big talkers. Men are trash. Motherhood is a trap. It's a tool of the patriarchy. I don't need kids. I just need a stupid dog. You're like, you must be sick. They talk about, some of the RadFems are occultists, and they're lesbians, and they talk about divine feminineness and turf that and turf this, and men can't be women. They stand up as defenders of womanhood and femaleness, But yet the way in which they talk about motherhood leaves much to be accounted for. And it's good that we have the expectation of motherhood, because this creates a positive environment, inshallah, around being a mother. Once you degrade motherhood to such a low position, as an inconvenience, as something just to get over, it reduces how much it's respected in society. When you call a baby a parasitic clump of cells and only a life if you want it, now you have reduced the miracle of life, the blessing of fertility, and you've become a rebellious little devil because you no longer appreciate the ability and capacity to reproduce. So RadFems, by attacking pregnancy, child fetal development, marriage, what it means to really be a woman on your deepest core, because it's so related to reproduction. They've tried to separate it because they feel some women who can't reproduce get their feelings hurt when they shouldn't. You know, you can still be an excellent woman if you are incapable of having children. And there are plenty of mothers who, one could argue, should have never had children because of how they were bad. But the child still has a right to exist even if their parent was trash. I'm glad I exist, even though my mom was a crackhead stripper. I'm still glad I exist, and now look, her descendants are Muslims. You see? Come on. Look at Moses. He was rescued and put into a basket, and his mother was great, but the Pharaoh didn't like his people, and now look, he was able to be rescued. It was wrong what Pharaoh did to Moses' people. You can't do second, third, fourth generational warfare upon a population because you don't like what their parents did. That's very North Korean-esque. So the RadFems, the way they attack motherhood's propagation in society, the way they have disdain for the positive clouds and rhetoric around motherhood, shows you that their heart is not in the right place. And when you see them shame heterosexuality as a tool of the patriarchy and encourage lesbianism and sperm donors, you see they have no logic. Why? They tell you, oh, don't have children with this man who isn't perfect, but go ahead and go to a sperm bank and have our random guys. Yeah, sure, on paper he looks good, but you're carrying his bloodline and you don't even know if you'd be compatible with him. You just look on the sheet and say, yeah, he's got this IQ, he's got this, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, let's carry his children. That's way more depraved than someone saying, hey, you know, I have this guy, he's not perfect, but I'm going to continue his bloodline because I actually know his face. I actually have had conversations with him. Your energies vibe, even if later you get a divorce because something didn't work out, you still had those beautiful moments. And that's way more spiritual than just lining up and being a dairy cow and getting some donor jizz, you know. It's funny that the RadFems say that women are not cows to just be reproduced and milked, yet dairy cows are inseminated artificially. So many of them. And there's a guy who will sell a dairy cow farm bull jizz, right? Most dairy farms now don't have like the bull come in and do his job. They usually just buy it and then put it in the cows themselves. So the RadFems actually behave more like dairy cows than they want to admit. The veal, the calf, is taken away and given milk from a bottle. It doesn't get to nurse at the teat of the mother cow. RadFems argue for putting kids in daycare, so separate them from their mother, just like a baby cow is separated from its mother. The dairy cow is milked, get that liquid gold. The woman is milked for her contributions to the GDP and isn't with her baby. But a RadFem will feel sadder that a cow is separated from its mama than a baby from its mother, because they would call that empowering. They don't call it empowering when a cow is separated, but it's empowering when a mother is separated from her cute little baby at 8 weeks to go back and grind to have some type of new diploma, new title, new something upon her wall that she can stare at and say it's all worth it for that little plaque. Whereas the baby's like, who's this new stranger having access to my diaper in the daycare? You know, and if you recall, just to go on a little tangent about daycare, there was a news story where a woman had given a really deep black eye to a 1-year-old. And it's really heartbreaking. And the amount of harm some children face in daycare is heartbreaking. And so, if we keep alive the compulsory motherhood, this helps to remind many women what their duty is towards their child, what their obligations are towards their child, and what sex really is. There's reproduction that comes from it. It's not just for pleasure. Because of birth control and abortion, the RadFems have turned that act into something more dead, lifeless, fleeting, and unimportant, and also have spread diseases due to that. Whereas when you look at the religious side, especially the Islamic side, illicit sexual intercourse is not condoned, not celebrated. Prostitutes are not seen as empowered, although there's, like I said, some RadFems say adult entertainment is wrong. Other occultic feminists and liberal progressive feminists and anarchist feminists say it's okay because they're getting the bag and they're getting money and they're just using those men and they're getting rich. So they see it as a materialistic success and they don't really factor in the spiritual decline, right? So there is a disagreement on that. But no matter which way you square it, the Islamic perspective on women and celebrating motherhood is something that makes women feel safe that they can want that. Because little girls in America are pushed to go into debt, freeze your eggs, don't even look for a guy at the age of 20, and then suddenly they start to get older and then they're like, oh, fertility, and then the state makes money off of you for fertility treatments. You could get pregnant when you're between 20 to 30, easier than when you're in your 30s, but they can't make as much money off of you. I know that sounds cliche, but sometimes it helps to think of the sinister and pernicious nature of greed and creating problems in order to milk money from a situation, right? So the way that they feel that pushing motherhood serves the goals of the patriarchy shows that they're not really in tune with how many women love to have children. It's fascinating how when you're going through the ringer after you give birth or have a C-section and you think, oh man, I don't know if I want to have another kid, but then later on when you get into your routine, you're settled in, everything has a rhythm and flow, an ebb and flow, such and such, you're like, oh, this is awesome, and there's no better feeling in the world. And then when your kid cries or has a tantrum, you're like, this is terrible. But then when your baby's cute, giggling, cooing, smiles at you with their chubby cheeks and their tiny little feet are wiggling, you're like, this is the best thing ever. And no flea-bitten dog or cat, houseplant, hamster, you name it, can compete with that. An animal cannot compete with a human child. And when you see so many RadFems place the animal above the human child, that should also tell you these women are very sick and inverted. And your body is going to be controlled through labor naturally, biologically. It's not the patriarchy. And it's funny because I just saw yesterday, Shira Seven, the occulted gold digger feminist, she said again that pregnant women shouldn't be working and you shouldn't marry a man who makes you work while pregnant. I found that to be quite intriguing, and she said that before, and I do agree with that. Because with my first child I worked, and with my two now, later on that I had, I didn't go to a traditional 9 to 5. And my mental health, my recovery, everything was so much better. And then you wake up and realize the lie that feminists tell women is to keep grinding it out. It's empowering to work through your pregnancy. It's empowering to go back to work as soon as possible. And it's empowering to use formula and ditch your kid at a daycare so strangers can raise them. So you can wear the pantsuit. So that you can get that corner office. It's all worth it. So that you can have more bragging rights on LinkedIn. No. No. You see the difference of the artificial system that the new modern American culture has set up for women, and how it goes against women's biology, and I would argue our fitra that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ingrained in us. It's great and a further blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't demand that us women go out and be CEOs. We don't have to claw, scratch, dig, maul, gnarl, gnash our way up to the top of the pyramid. And that men are the providers and protectors and sustainers of us by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that they have an obligation and duty towards us. That takes so much pressure off of us financially. And we're able to focus on our children. So by having the societal expectation of motherhood, this also puts the pressure upon men as well. That you must provide for your wife. You must do right by your children. Even if you're poor, you still must keep going. There's hadiths in Riyadh Salihin about not begging and selling firewood instead. Not all of us can be rich. Some of us will have to be middle class or have our lot in life. But motherhood isn't just something reserved for the rich, and Islam doesn't shame poor mothers, and Islam tells people to give sadaqah, to give zakah, to give charity. And men are the hadith that talks about the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, where a man who raises 2 daughters, they'll be like this on Judgment Day, so really close. You can see tons of pro-parenthood things in Islam. We are, see, the Christians have be fruitful and multiply, and we have similar to the Prophet, peace be upon him, saying, you know, on Judgment Day our numbers will be vast, and so we have that bonus as well. But you will see a lot of American Christians say, if you can't feed them, don't breed them. And the Magatardian Christian white nationalists will often shame people who use EBT or have food stamps or have some type of government program, Section 8 housing and whatnot. So they don't really feel too charitable towards the needy, although there are lots of Christians who run pregnancy centers to try to dissuade women from getting abortions, and who allow pop-up food banks to occur within their church and have a pantry for the needy. So there are some Christians who still hold that biblical value that children are a blessing and you don't need to be harsh towards the poor and needy because it's a good deed to tend to them. And the Bible does have verses that talk about helping the needy, but the MAGA Christians are a very pernicious cult and sect of Christianity that should be really re-educated on what their theology teaches. But they worship Trump too heavily to really care about what their Bible says, I'd argue. So again, the RadFems have attacked the Christians here in America, And it's not going to be too long before they try to go after Muslim women and really make them anti-natalist, very angry, career-driven, Medusa morons. Okay? So, it's okay to promote motherhood. And the patriarchy, I do not think, pushes motherhood in order to control women's bodies in labor. Because men have the capacity also to like to make a family, to want to have children, you know, that's a loving thing. But the RadFems frame it as a vile, evil, nefarious energy. Whereas, in reality, men who want to have children are a prize, and they rise to the occasion of wanting to do everything they can to provide for that family. It's the men who don't want to have children and who just want to use women for lust, I'd argue, are the dangerous ones. So again, the RadFem has it inverted. I'd argue the one who doesn't want to have children and just wants to have zina, illicit sexual intercourse with women, wham bam, thank you ma'am, they are the ones who actually are making women's labor and bodies less healthy, less utilized, and leading those women towards self-destruction. Because women do get baby hungry and want to have that sort of nesting, calm, protective spirit around them that men provide through the patriarchal ethos, right? And Islam is a patriarchal religion, Surah An-Nisa. Okay? So beware of the childless man who doesn't want to have children with you and who won't really have a lot of skin in the game. It's really easy to dump a woman who you don't have the responsibility of children with. They don't really lose anything by walking away. But when a man has a family, more often than not, he can think to himself, hey man, I gotta make this work because my kids are watching and it's expected of me, and there's a societal expectation of fatherhood as well as motherhood, right? See, they never talk about what fathers are expected to do. They sort of demonize husbands and fathers and not ever touch the subject of the importance of fathers. So, let me know what you think about the conversation around compulsory motherhood. Do you think motherhood should be promoted? I do. It's not promoted in public schools. Debt is promoted. Working is promoted. You're seen as someone with no ambition if you don't want to sacrifice your 20s to grinding it out at a desk. I'd argue that raising children is one of the most noble things on this planet. And if natural disaster occurred, if we're living through The Last of Us, zombie apocalypse, Walking Dead, no careers would matter. No one would care except for like doctors and other types, dentists and such. But your rink-a-dink email job, your marketing job, none of that is important. But the importance of motherhood will always remain. Whereas your specific job that you take so much pride in and boast about on LinkedIn and have an inflated salary, that job could easily be swept away. And now we see more and more AI taking over. And sorry, there is no AI that's going to be able to replicate that spiritual connection between mother and child. Not possible. No matter how many chatbots they create to make weird conversations, your mom is your mom. And your umbilical cord was there. And tech can't take that from you, nor replicate it, nor replace it. I don't care. Let me know. Enjoy the vlog.